I remember these two young ladies, they waited so patiently. And when we then, had the opportunity to speak, they said to me, look, we don't have any questions to ask. We just wanted to let you know that it was really nice to have someone who looks like us up at the front doing the
Mm.
speaking.
Mm.
That was all they wanted to say.
Oh.
And it really meant a lot to me to hear that. So in essence, what they were saying was that we've been going for these events and things, and we're not, we haven't seen people who look like us.
Mm.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Listen In podcast. My name's Aravana.
My name is Anya.
And my name's Boomy.
Let's get into it.
So today we'll be speaking with Angela Teller. She's a dietitian, a coach, an author, and a speaker. That's what I know of her, but I'll let Angela have the floor and tell us a bit more about herself.
Yes, thank you for that introduction. My name is Angela Teller, and I am the founder and principal consultant at Illumina Lifestyle Consulting. And we provide nutrition consultancy, media and speaker services. We also provide training, healthcare, and ethnic services to organizations. We also provide workplace nutrition and health services as well. And we also work with individuals to help them to achieve their nutrition, health, and well-being goals. I remember one of the things that you did mention when we spoke earlier was around where I'd studied. So I completed my degree at King's College London, and my areas of interest sort of revolve around healthcare catering, ethnic specific healthcare, and well-being, and also wellness coaching.
That's amazing. There's so many things that I'm really, really interested in terms of what you've just told us of all the things that you do. What is it that kind of took you to that route of looking in that area? What sort of drove you to that part of your speciality?
In terms of what got me to that, I mean, I've practiced as a dietitian now for, we're heading on to 20 years. And in the years of practice, you kind of, I mean, what I discovered was that, like you were saying, there wasn't a lot around sort of well, at the time anyway, there wasn't much focus. Don't get me wrong, there was mention of it,
Mm.
with regard to ethnic specific maybe care from a nutrition perspective. It was there, but it wasn't necessarily focused on. There was a lot around um, these foods, or this food culture exists, and yet there wasn't a lot around what was healthful and what wasn't. It was
Mm-hmm.
mostly portrayed as not being healthful, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And that's
Mm.
not necessarily the case. So
Mm.
what took me there was just my experience and the glaring lack of cultural specific advice. Because I mean, from a healthcare perspective, if you want, and as a practitioner, if you want to elicit change, then you have to give your clients the tools
Mm-hmm.
and the wherewithal to make that change. It's not enough to say, oh, you know what, this is not very good in your diet. You have to help them make that change by making that
Mm-hmm.
change easier. So in essence, facilitating that change.
Mm.
That's one of the things that was lacking. There wasn't a lot around. I mean, now cultural competency seems to be more of a common thing. It's
Mm.
still lacking, if I'm going to be honest, but at the same time, it's more acknowledged than it was back then.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
so, being someone from the community, I thought to myself, so what can I do to change the dynamic around this particular area? And there was a particular case in point where I remember at the time I was working within the NHS, I remember having a particular a client or patient come, and I think you could tell that he was nervous or
Mm.
apprehensive because he wasn't sure what advice he was going to get. or he was going to be given. And so I remember doing a diet history with him. Like, I think I must have been seeing him for either diabetes, I think. I can't remember. It's been a while. But one of the things I noticed was that as we began to do the diet history and he realized that I understood the foods he was calling, he just loosened up. When you're seeing a client, the fact that they are understood, the fact that they feel listened to, it just opens the door for them to then listen to what you have to say. And for me, I remember him saying, I asked him, I can't remember what the specific question, but I remember asking him maybe what he'd had for supper or something like that. And when he mentioned it, and I didn't bat an eyelid and ask, what's that? I just made my note. He said, do you know what that is? And I said, yes, I do. And there was, like I said, he just loosened up, he relaxed. He can't, and that for me was, well, I wouldn't call it an epiphany, but it just drove home the point. And that's when I thought, okay, what can I do? How can I make this such that people don't feel that when they come to see a healthcare professional like myself, a dietitian, they don't have to kind of come with that apprehension. And by the end of that session, he was very willing to take on board what I said because he felt understood. And I believe that that is a basic human desire. We all want to be understood. We all want to know that we've been listened to. And if you think about it, really, it's about validation. We all want to be validated. And I believe in my clinic that afternoon, I validated him. I validated his culture, his heritage. And so it was a very different gentleman that walked out of the clinic room. And yeah, that was kind of where it started. And then, like, I think you've mentioned that as well. I think you hinted on the fact that there isn't much out there. If you look around, I mean, things have changed a lot now, but at the time, there weren't any many books or resources that were promoting, like I said, the healthful side, because every food culture has its pluses and minuses.
Yes.
Absolutely every.
Yeah.
And it's just finding or highlighting the positives so that people can embrace those, and influence the health outcomes that they desire.
That's awesome. And I think also, especially in an area like, in terms of food health and working with people that have something like a chronic condition like diabetes or things like that, that actually really it can impact on their how long they might live and things like that. I think that having that cultural competency, like you said, and being able to support them with what they're used to and making them feel like they're heard must make the outcomes for those patients so much better than if they felt like the person they were working with didn't understand or didn't want to understand where they were coming from. So that's really amazing to hear. And I think even though obviously we're all speech and language therapists, but actually that principle goes across the board, and it's something that we can apply in our area as well. And it might be that if we meet somebody that's from the same culture as us, that it might feel a bit easier to do these things. But I feel that even if you're not from the same culture, the principle again applies, and you can apply that to other people as well.
It certainly does. And like I said, if you're not careful, there's just some things that can be a barrier between you and your client. And so it matters. And it takes it, I think, even in terms of relating with people outside of, in quote, your culture or your even your specialty, for instance, speech language therapists liaising with maybe occupational therapists. Yes, they're both are within the AHP family, but they're different. And it'll take an effort, because what happens is that when you are able to relate with someone in that way, what you're doing is you're letting them know that you know, I've made the effort to find out. I've made, so it, and that's where that, you know, that whole thing around validation, it lets me know that you've bothered.
Yeah.
I matter.
Yes, definitely.
You know, so yeah, definitely need to, you know, from a healthcare profession's point of view, you need to have that sense of, you know, around being able to cross certain barriers, but it's going to take some work on your part.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask a follow-on question from that as well, around thinking about what might be some of the barriers that dietitians or other professionals might face in terms of, you know, when someone from a certain culture comes in and they talk about certain foods, what kind of barriers might professionals face in terms of being able to ask those questions, or, you know, being able to find out about, you know, specifically what foods are related to that culture?
Well, I mean, when I was doing my training, we did, I mean, part of the training, I'm not sure how it works now, but at the time, because the systems have changed a lot, obviously, over time. But I remember what we had to, part of the training, we had to get to understand different cultures. Okay. However, in fact, one experience stands out in particular. I remember part of my, because, well, at the time when I was studying, you had your, I think it was, we did 2 years of the degree. Then we had, let me get it right. We had a catering placement. I remember that. I remember having to fry chips, and I had to don this. I remember having to fry chips that was a 6-week period. And then I think it was between, my third and final year. Yeah, between third and fourth years, you then did call it 7-month placement. It was a clinical placement, and then you kind of, and of the 7 months, I remember you had to do a month complimentary. But I remember part of my training, you know, the clinical placement training, I remember we had to, something to do with the Jewish community. And that really stuck in my mind, because I learned a lot about the community. I learned about the fact that, for instance, and did you know that Orthodox Jewish homes would have, in the kitchen, they would have 2 separate areas for preparing meat dishes and dairy dishes, for instance. These just little things that, you know, you learn. You also, and even, I mean, it wasn't just the Jewish community, other communities, you know, we had to learn how to interact with people from those communities. If I'm honest, I can't remember doing anything with the African or Afro-Caribbean community, but those are the little things that we did, that when it was then time, you know, to practice, those hints and tips came in handy, because you understood how to approach a particular client. In fact, in my mind, I'm thinking, I wonder how cultural competency would be taught today, because things are so different now. You know, there's a lot more awareness of the need to understand people from other cultures better. You know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we weren't trained at the time, but compared to now, the awareness wasn't as much as it, you know, now as it was, you know, at the time. So I think it's just having an understanding that, as a healthcare professional, your job is to reach that person, and you have to find a way to do it, obviously within professional parameters, but it's just something you have to do. And that's part of your role as a healthcare professional. How do you meet the needs of this particular client who is sitting across me, or who I have to visit, if it's a home visit or whatever, or who's under my care? It's part of that duty of care, because when you look at a patient or a client, you're not looking at just the aspect that you're maybe, you know, seeing them for, oh, they have swallowing issues. You're going to have to look at them, look at the wider picture, you know, their social setup. You know, you have to look at, obviously, the medical side, the emotional. So they're looking at the whole person, and it's going to take some effort on your part. That's what we're trained to do. That's what we should be doing. And I mean, I'm sure you've come across cases where you've had to sort of go over and beyond, but
Yeah.
you do that because you know that you have a duty of care
Mhm.
towards your client.
Yeah.
So I hope that
Brilliant.
answers that question.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, just wondering what prompted your choice of career. I know you do lots of other things as well, but what was it that kind of made you think, yes, I want to be a dietitian?
Well, believe it or not, I was actually meant to be a medical doctor.
Oh.
So it was in the process of pursuing a degree in medicine that I realized that medicine was not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during that time that a tutor of mine encouraged me to consider nutrition and dietetics. I remember being in college, and in fact, I remember he actually called King's College to say, look, I have a student here who might be interested. And that was it. I just went to visit, and I was told, look, this is what we're doing here. If you're interested, just let us know. And that was how I got in. What makes it interesting, though, is that I did end up having to study medicine as part of my degree.
No escape.
That was really interesting to find out. But I remember finishing and then getting my first role. And yeah, I just jumped into it, and I was fast tracked into a senior position and then moved on to specialist before I then left the NHS to set up on my own. Yeah. So that's really, so it wasn't like, nothing prompted it per se. It was just along the journey to somewhere else, I just realized that somewhere else wasn't going to be for me. I mean, I think I would have made a great doctor, but would I have enjoyed medicine? I don't know. Yeah.
You clearly enjoy this though, so. Can I follow that up actually with a question in terms of diversity? How diverse was your profession at the time?
Gosh, I mean, okay. At the time, there weren't that many, I'll be honest. I mean, for instance, if I remember on my cohort, I think there were about 20. There weren't many of us. Like for my cohort, for instance, I remember, I think there were probably about, I think there were only 2 or 3 of us for my course cohort, and there were about 21. 2 or 3, because I remember, because that stood out very clearly. You don't forget these sorts of things. Even now, I don't know, I'd have to check to get the correct figures, but if you consider the fact that we already a minority just overall within the profession, that's going to be reflective.
So how was that for you, being on the course and being from a minority background, an ethnic minority background? How was that experience for you?
I had no issues with it. I never apologize for being in a room, because I'm meant to be there. So let's get on with what we need to get on with.
That's good. That's great.
It never bothered me.
Yeah.
It never, I mean, even as a student then, it never bothered me. And yeah, even till now, it's okay.
Fantastic. Good.
And what about your colleagues at the time? Did you feel like everybody had that same sort of approach, or did you feel like some of your colleagues who were from different backgrounds felt a bit more sort of out of place or anything like that?
I mean, to be fair, I mean, I remember, no, I can't, I mean, I can't remember that. And for me not to remember means it wasn't an issue. That said, I think during my training, I think there were some experiences that made me kind of realize that it was just, purely because of where I was from, or, yeah, because I remember a few experiences, not everybody, but there was just some little, things that happen. You think, why? I mean, now on reflection, I mean, then I didn't really take it to heart, but just on reflection, you think, you know, but to be honest, I never let those sorts of things get in the way. You know, like I said, I'll never apologize. This is who I am. It's either you like it or you lump it. It's just one of the I'll never apologize for being who I am. I will never apologize for, you know, being in a room, because like I said, I'm meant to be there. So let's do what we need to do and yeah, get on with it. So yeah.
It's absolutely, and I think that's really important actually. Do you really feel like diversity in the profession has been promoted, or also do you feel like that's changing the dynamics of the demographics? Is that changing as well?
I mean, one of the things that I must say is there seem to be a lot more up and coming. Well, I'll speak for my profession anyway, a lot more. I mean, based on, well, obviously with social media, you're able to come across people, you know, more people than say back in the day when social media didn't exist. So from what I've seen, I think that there's definitely a lot more ethnic diversity in the profession, in my profession, because there are a lot of dietitians to be, you know, student dietitians that you meet online, like I said, within the social media spheres. However, and that being said, I still think that there is a long way to go to ensure ethnic diversity. And I believe that ethnic diversity needs to begin at the top of the profession and on the boards of professional bodies in order to then drive that diversity across the entire profession. That's how I see it. And I also, you know, I really think also that there needs to be a move beyond tokenism.
Yes.
To actually valuing professionals from ethnic minority backgrounds for their contributions.
Yes.
And also there should be an acknowledgement that the negative experiences that they have had are valid and very real.
Yes.
You know,
Definitely.
because I think if we're not careful, it's just tokenism. It's just tokenism, and let's just call it out for what it is if we're not careful. And I also think that there just needs to be a genuine, that's a very key word, a genuine move away from just trying to be seen to promote ethnic diversity to, you know, so moving away from that to taking actual effective action to make the necessary changes happen. Yeah, that's why I was talking about tokenism, because if we're not careful, it's like, oh, people just, or organizations want to be seen, or professions want to be seen as, rather than actually being.
Yes, definitely. And there is a difference. I think once you start
massive difference.
Once you start, like, once you get into an organization, it's so easy to spot all the kind of like, we're just doing this for a checklist, or like to just kind of like fulfill all righteousness. And actually, yes, there is that genuine desire, like you said, that keyword, to promote this. And I'm glad that you said that, in your opinion, that actually diversity has to start from the top down, because my follow-on question to you would have been, what do you think can be done? Because the truth is, although you're a dietitian, a lot of what you're saying is across the board. We underestimate the importance of representation. The more people see people that look like them, not as a result of tokenism, but actually valuing their experiences, things will just naturally progress from that point. People want to put in their best foot forward. People want to make a change. But if they actually feel like, well, it's not going to be valued, or I'm just that token at the table for your checklist, then it's going to impact people's well-being and what they do. That's definitely important.
I mean, I'll just share. I mean, a few years ago, I had a really, for me, it was a treasured moment. I'd gone to an event, and I was speaking at the event, and you know, at the end, well, I was one of the speakers. At the end, usually people want to have a word with you, ask questions, because obviously there's not enough time usually. And I remember these two young ladies, they waited so patiently. And when we then, had the opportunity to speak, they said to me, look, we don't have any questions to ask. Because sometimes, when you deliver a presentation, people want to then ask further questions regarding what you've spoken about. And they both said, we don't have any questions for you. We just wanted to let you know that it was really nice to have someone who looks like us up at the front doing the speaking. That was all they wanted to say. And it really meant a lot to me to hear that. So in essence, what they were saying was that we've been going for these events and things, and we haven't seen people who look like us.
Yeah.
And that's all they wanted to let me know. And I remember saying, because I remember there was a bit of a queue, and they were kind of coming, and they were kind of not apologizing, but it was almost like, you know what, oh, we don't have any questions, don't worry, we're not here to bother you. We just wanted to let you know. And that meant a lot, because it made me realize that, and that's why I said, there's still a long way to go.
Yes, definitely.
Because this happened, I'm talking a few years, maybe a couple of years ago. And they're not the first, and they certainly will not be the last.
No.
Yeah.
So in terms of things that can be done, I really think it needs to start, like I said, from the board. Right from the top. It's the only way. Because if you look at the boards, when boards meet, if you don't have someone, for instance, or you don't have a representation from certain groups, see or understand the issues that group is facing,
Yes.
if nobody's there to speak up and or provide insight,
Yes.
how?
And how are you making decisions on their behalf without necessarily
without
understanding?
finding out? So in essence, you're making those decisions blind. I don't think it's enough to just put out a survey, tell us what you think. No. I believe that they should be part of the decision-making process. Don't make decisions for me based on what you're asking me. Make me part, and this is what we do with our clients, if you think about it.
Completely. Yeah.
You don't just sit there telling them, you know what, I've arranged XYZ for you. It's a partnership. Okay, so Mr. X, this is the issue that I understand you've been facing. To counter that, this is what I'm thinking, so do you have any thoughts? Do you have any contributions? Do you agree? So if as a profession or as professions, we liaise with our clients, we're not prescriptive, then why should we as professions be prescriptive for the profession or for certain groups of the profession, if that makes sense? It's just a very similar.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think it does start. We've had so many conversations about this in the past in terms of people at the top and things like that. And I think one of the things that you've mentioned that I really do feel strongly about as well is just actions. It's important to have proper actions, because otherwise you just end up going round and round in circles. Of course, discussion is important for kind of getting on the same page and hearing people's stories and all of that sort of thing, but it gets to a point where it's like, actually enough talking, let's do something, and do something, like you say, genuine, because people can feel it, whether it's us as professionals or our clients. They can feel it when you're not being genuine, or when you're just doing something for the sake of it. So I really, really just agree with everything that you said just there. So yeah, thank you for that. That was really, really important.
So what then motivated you to move from working within the NHS into private practice?
Well, I remember in my second year, in fact, was it second or third year? Because I can see myself. I remember where I was sitting. This was at home. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to work for myself. I just had that thing that, I would really want to work for myself. And I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. Yeah, because I'd set up and I'd run a number of businesses in my late teens. So I'd always just had that sense of working for myself, doing things on my own terms. And I must say that I do enjoy the flexibility and adventure that being an entrepreneur brings. I think those are the two key things: the flexibility in terms of doing things, like I said, on my own terms, but also being able to make a difference, to do things how I want them to be done, or think, well, today I'm doing this and tomorrow I prefer to do that over, whereas in essence, you decide what you want to do. Those are the things that I enjoy. Okay, and as well as making a difference, as well as trying new things. So that adventure, a sense of, okay, let's go for it. So, but, however, I must add that it's not for the faint of heart.
I can imagine.
It's true. It's certainly not the soft option.
Yeah.
You need to be, and I think we'll probably talk about this. I'm sure we'll talk about this in a bit more detail along the way. But you need to be someone who can roll with the punches, because there are challenges that come with the territory. For instance, the buck ends with you. If it works, it ends with you. If it doesn't work, it ends with you. Some of the things that I've already hinted, I enjoy the flexibility. I enjoy the freedom. I like you have the autonomy to work as you choose. You can work according to your ethics, your personal ethics. You can work according to what your beliefs. You know what I mean? And you can also go with your topics of interest. What really piques your interest, rather than, oh, well, this is what you have to do. And then in terms of, it can be very rewarding as well, because it's nothing like creating something or building from scratch and seeing it work. It's just fulfilling. You can touch people's lives on your own terms. Like I've said that a number of times. And your opportunities are so varied. So you can be doing A today and Z tomorrow and D the day after, instead of just A.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to be aware that working for yourself, you need to, these are the things that you need to, because I'm someone who I want to be as transparent as possible, lay the cards on the table. They say before warned is before armed. So it's a lot of hard work, a lot of hard work, especially in the beginning. And need to be aware that it can be lonely and isolating if you allow it to be. And when you decide to step out on your own, you have to consider the loss of income, because you're no longer someone's employee. Like I said, the buck ends with you. There are no employee benefits unless you institute them yourself.
Yes.
So these are just some of the things that, well, the realities of the life.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to others to have the whole, as no one can give you the whole picture, but to have a balanced view, like you said, because then you can make, like you say, an informed decision. And I think it's really good to just hear other people's stories and see how they've made it through, or how they've made a path for themselves, and all of that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that based on the things that you've said, actually, sounds like it's not just particular to your profession anyway. So regardless of whoever's listening and they're looking to make that transition, all that you said, your experiences is very balanced. So they would be able to take something away from that. It's really useful. Thank you.
It was mentioned earlier as well that you're an author. So you've written some books, which is great. So tell us a bit about those books, and also what motivated you to write them.
Well, okay. The books I've written 2 books. so far. The first one was Healthy West African and Wise. And that was, it kind of takes us back to the beginning of the conversation when we were talking about cultural competency. And that book really revolves around looking at healthy diet and lifestyle from a West African perspective. And also I wanted to, because like I was saying earlier on, there wasn't much at the time regarding, you know, looking at, I remember saying to you that every food culture has its positives and negatives. And I wanted to create a resource that people of West African origin could read, and it would give them the facts they needed to live a healthy lifestyle, to eat healthily, and to help them make those informed decisions that would then result in preserving their health, managing any chronic health conditions they might have. And I wanted it to be very simple, easy to use, easy to remember, you know, tips, things and, you know, tips. And so it was really all about applying my professional expertise to this particular community, and to, you know, just give them that tool to help facilitate any dietary changes they had to make or needed to make or would like to make. And so, yeah, I wrote, that was the first book I wrote. And then the second book is called The Healthy West African and Wise Food Guide. And I just wanted to showcase, I think there were about 80 West African foods, very, you know, common West African foods. I wanted to showcase their nutritional benefits. I wanted to showcase the foods themselves, the different, and also show some food culture. So it also provides the different West African names. It provides, like I said, nutritional benefits, and also to highlight some of the unknown facts. So there was a lot, you know, for each food, you have nutritional benefits, you have the different West African names, you have a lovely picture of the food, and then you have a little known fact about each food. You know, so did you know that? You know, because I just felt it was just, you know, food is a lot more than just nutrition. It's also about a person's heritage, their cultural identity. And I felt that somebody had to, you know, blow the trumpet, you know, for West African foods, and to highlight the positive aspects of it. And then with regards to the not so positive aspects, give practical advice or tips that people could then use to, you know, turn that around. So that's what those two books are about, really.
That sounds amazing. Could you kind of, as you said, you wanted to sort of, you know, showcase African foods and have, you know, have that did you know information. Are there any, not to put you on the spot, but is there anything that you think would be quite an interesting one to share with some of our listeners that, you know, they might not have heard of? Or even for me, I'm quite intrigued actually, just to kind of see what sort of things you've written about in terms of West African dishes.
So for instance, okra is a very popular vegetable within the West African communities. And did you know that it's very rich in what we call, not just because, you know, vegetables, people think, insoluble fiber, but it's also very rich in soluble fiber, which is why it has that sticky texture. Yeah, and that particular kind of fiber has been shown to help lower cholesterol levels.
Oh, really?
Yes. Did you know that?
No, I know now. I'm going to tell my mum. Because actually, cholesterol is something that we're always, you know, certain people need to. One of the messages is you need to get your cholesterol down and all of this. And actually, okra, like you say, it's a very popular. I don't know if popular is the right word, but common food.
And across cultures as well, isn't it?
Yes, so, I mean, it's very popular in the Asian cultures.
Yes.
I think the Mediterranean cultures as well, like the Turkish community. I know they eat okra. So it's just the little things like that. I mean, even in terms of regulating blood sugar levels. as well.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, because if you think about, it's like it's just these little things that I felt I wanted people to be more aware of.
And it's very helpful, actually. And I remember that you mentioned that you wrote it for the West Africa to help them make those decisions. But actually, it would be really helpful for any professionals as well. So a dietitian or even anyone who's just interested in other foods. I mean, like the way food shops, especially like specialty foods now, are popping up everywhere. There are people trying more of a range now. So actually, the information in there would be helpful for anyone who's interested in trying a wider range of variety to actually make those well-informed decisions. So that's really good. And I'll just add it here, and I hope Angela doesn't mind, that she also has a publishing house. So you publish these books, well, as you publish them as well, isn't it? It's Lumina Publishing, isn't it? So
yes,
you do a whole lot, Angela. You do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and this is what I was saying, because and at the time I did look into getting the books published by a publisher, and when that wasn't happening, I just thought, you know what, then if then we set up our own publishing house. Why not? So that was the route that we took, and in hindsight, I'm glad we did it that way, because there was a lot of learning. Once you've done the journey, you will never look at a book the same.
Gives you a whole lot of a different perspective and appreciation, isn't it, for all the work that goes on behind the scenes to put it together.
And one thing I want to say, to be honest, is when you, as an entrepreneur, you find that there's a lot of learning, a lot. I'm not sure if we're going to have a chance to talk about this, but CPD, as an entrepreneur, every day is CPD. Every single day is CPD, because you're always learning, you're always having to sit back and reflect. Should I, how did this go? How, what worked, what didn't work, what went well, what didn't work well, why didn't it work as well as it could be? So there's always CPD, always. For those who don't know what CPD is, it's just continuous professional development, which as healthcare professionals, we are bound to keep on top of, or to keep doing, as a means of keeping our practice skills up to date, so we can keep our licenses to practice. So there's always CPD. So I mean, for instance, for me, that was a good chunk of learning, because it meant bringing together a team. Maybe that's something that I might look into sharing at some point. There's just a lot of learning, having to bring together a team to set up a publishing house.
And just kind of linked to that, in terms of, because as you said, you trained as a dietitian, and you're an entrepreneur, and you had to do a lot of learning. Did you have people around you who kind of helped you to find out some of the information? Because I'm just thinking, we had a conversation the other day with a guest that was a lecturer, and I'm just thinking about people who might be listening and thinking, oh, that's really amazing, but I don't know anybody, I don't have any contacts, I would love to do something like this, but I basically can't. Like, what sort of advice would you give them to be able to start looking at ways that they can achieve similar things to what you've achieved, or kind of take that inspiration from you to start something new?
Well, one of the things that I would say, is you need to definitely, you need that support, to be honest. One of the best ways of doing things is to learn from other people's experiences. So this is where having a mentor comes in quite handy. If we kind of backtrack a bit, because I know we've talked a bit about setting up, I remember that the question you asked was what motivated me to set up, and what have been the challenges and the benefits, for instance. I mean, and I shared some things, and I was saying, I need to give people a balanced view. Due diligence, need to do your due diligence for sure. Definitely need to do your due diligence if you want to walk this path. And having a mentor is one way of helping to keep you going on the journey. And it doesn't even have to be so sort of in quote someone who has gone before. You could be one of your peers who is doing what you would like to do. Yeah, doesn't always have to be someone who's gone way ahead of you. It could just be, you know, someone who is doing what you would like to do and they're doing it well. So that's one way of getting that, you know, that support, so to speak. You could also join appropriate groups. It could be, you know, groups that provide peer support, networking, opportunities for collaboration. So that's something else to consider. In terms of, like I was saying, setting up, like I said, do your due diligence, very, very important. You need to ask yourself certain questions and you need to count the cost. That's the very first question I would suggest if somebody, you know, asked me, you know, so how do I go about this? Count the cost. You know, are you the right kind of person for this? Because it can be intense, especially at the beginning. As with anything new, you need to, you know, to build up that initial momentum is going to require a lot from you. And you need to be someone who can deal with uncertainty and pressure. And not everybody can, or not everybody chooses to, is probably a more appropriate. We can all deal with uncertainty and pressure if we're forced to, but it's whether you're choosing to. And you need to, you know, are you disciplined? Are you self-motivated? Are you business-like, professional? Do you have endurance and stamina? Do you have a good support system? I mean, for me, what's worked for me has been my faith as a Christian, has been an absolute anchor for me. And then family, and then mentors, in that order. That's really been my support system over the past, because we set up the business in July 2007. So we'll be 14 this year.
Wow.
So that's what's really kept me going. And also just, you know, test the waters. You want to do something, you have an idea, test the waters and see. You know, but you can do so safely. You don't have to quit the day job yet, because it might not be profitable initially. So always test the waters and see.
Definitely. In your experience, how have people's attitude, especially probably people of BAME origin, how have their attitude changed towards health, so that like maintaining their health and their well-being? How's that changed?
Well, you know what? I think within a lot of the BME cultures, there's this thing of health being wealth anyway. Yeah, I think that's if you look at a lot of the cultures, health is deemed to be wealth. However, I think if we look at where we're at now with COVID, I think it's certainly grabbed people's attention, especially considering that at the beginning, when this whole thing broke, you have we did lose a lot of people from these communities to COVID, especially given that a lot of the healthcare and frontline industries tend to be dominated by people from these communities. So I think people are there's always been a growing awareness with regards to health. But I think with COVID, people are even more, it's just woken people up. Not that they were fast asleep, but it's just, like I said, grabbed people's attention. People seem to be more interested in their health, particularly, I mean, I'll speak from my perspective, particularly when it comes to food, because food is one of those things that you can actually control. So I think what COVID has done, it's just jolted some people into action.
Yeah, it's certainly done that for me, I think. I think it really made me think more about, you know, taking my health and well-being
more seriously.
A lot more seriously. So yeah, I can relate to that.
I think in fact, just something that you just said just caught my attention was the well-being aspect, considering that there's been a lot of isolation, you know, and when you look at BME communities, there's a lot, we tend to be very community focused. So this, you know, like for instance, with the having to isolate, that I think an aspect that people are now but people are missing, like, because we tend to congregate, you know, it's just the way we do things. And so in terms of well-being, you know, knowing that, oh, you know, you can't be with so-and-so person at this point in time, I think people's attitudes to a lot of things are going to be changed forever after this, to a lot of things, a lot. I think with considering because this is a global thing. It's not just what's the word, limited to any one place. And so people's attitudes, I mean, one of the things I think is on in general, regardless of community or origin, I think people are going to be more grateful for things that were taken for granted in the past.
Definitely.
People are going to, or not are going to, are now seeing that you can live without certain things. And I think this whole situation has given people the opportunity to figure out, you know, what really is important here. You know, so for instance, in this day and time, if you're alive, you have a roof over your head, you have, do you see what I mean? I mean, they're just things, oh yeah, you take for granted, but the fact that you're alive in the midst of so much, you know, sadly, death, it's not something to be taken for granted. So I think people's attitudes generally are going to, you know, not be the same.
Yeah. So if you could go back in time and talk to Angela at her beginning of her journey, her training and all of that, what would you say to her? What sort of advice would you give her? Or
all I would say was that, you know what, you have a great future ahead of you. Just keep going.
Angela, in summary, what are your take-home messages for our listeners today?
Take-home messages would be around, for anyone who is interested in the profession of dietetics, why not is the question I have. Why not? If you're someone who has been considering starting out on your own, once again, why not? I hope I've given some insights into what it's like working for oneself. And, you know, I wish anyone who decides to make that journey all the best. I hope that they've gained some insight and some pointers from me. I also would like people to take away the fact that their health is in their hands in many ways, and that it's up to them to make up their minds how they want their health to be. And that it's not about making all these, you know, making many changes. It's just a few small changes and being consistent with them. And I'd also like to say that I know we're currently in a very challenging time, as we've alluded to already, but there are brighter days ahead. It won't always be like this.
I would like to say a very special thank you to Angela Teller for joining us on today's episode of Listening Meets. she spoke about her journey. She had lots of tips and advice for obviously for managing our general health through this time, as well as obviously for professionals that are looking to go more the independent route. So that means like starting out a business by themselves and being entrepreneurs. So Angela gave lots of tips and advice for that. For anyone who's interested in finding out more about Angela and obviously interested in her books, her website is healthywestafrican.com. That's healthywestafrican.com. And as always, please share your thoughts with us on this episode, and obviously continue to engage with us on our social media platforms. Until next time. Bye.